Hi guys, it's another episode of Party Chatter, and I am super excited. One of my holy grails of party chatter is upon us. And I said potty. I'm already stumbling because I am excited. I am here with April Ethereal. April is an escort, not the car made by Ford. April is a sex worker, and she's also a gamer, and according to her blog, an anime fan. So we are going to talk real things today, guys. Strap in. April, welcome to the program.
Yeah, hi.
So after that big whee, yeah. So
Yeah.
I think the first place we have to start is, what games do you play? What do you like to play?
Um, well, in recent history, I haven't been playing as much as I used to, but has been an integral part of my life since I was like very young. Like the first games that I remember playing, which is actually a DOS game, was a Hexagon, which is a puzzle game. So it's the first, game that I actually remember playing, and then I played stuff like um, Supperplex, which is like another sort of puzzly game, and then I went into Jazz the Jackrabbit,
Oh,
Gex, those awesome like really old games. Dune, I absolutely loved Dune when I was younger. Total Annihilation, I was like big into RTS when I was like, this is when I was like 6, 7, 8. This is when I was playing these games. And it ranged from like the original Doom, Quake, all that sort of stuff. And then when I hit about 15, that's when I got really heavy into it because I started in the landing scene where
okay.
people join up and get their computers together and play video games. So that was definitely my awakening in terms of getting really hardcore into like Diablo and all those other games. Like I had the biggest game that I played was definitely Diablo and Total Annihilation. I like wasted, not wasted. I enjoyed my childhood years playing those games.
Now, is it so crazy expensive to game in Australia? I remember a friend telling me a while back that it's way more expensive to buy, console systems and games because of your version code down there. Is it still like that?
I believe so.
Yeah.
I think it's also a case of the finances in a way, and it's also they have kind of a monopoly on the business side of things down here. So, for instance, a Fallout game, it was costing us maybe like $95 to $100, and that's a lot of money. And in American dollars, that's about 120
Yeah, because your dollars are
American
higher
dollars,
than the US dollar.
something ridiculous like that. And it's just like, mm-mm. So I always wait until things come on special, or I go on GameStop and purchase it at the American price, which is a lot cheaper. And then I'm just like, yay, puts into Steam.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
pretty much a fail.
people just plots when they hear the cost of gaming around the world. I mean, when I found out a PlayStation in Latin America was like $2,000, I'm like, wow. We don't,
Ouch.
we don't realize what it's like for other places that don't have those economies of scale that we do here, that we can get things relatively cheaply. But, you make good money doing what you do. So let's take people sort of through the reality of your job. And I'm sure you don't really have a regular day, but what's
Mhm.
sort of a typical day for you?
Well, currently it's a mix of everything because I do school 2 days a week, and then I've also got work, which I never really have a set schedule because it's so random. Like it's basically just like working for yourself. You never know when you're going to get the next job, so
Mhm.
it's like you're just your own independent person. Originally, I used to run completely independently, where I did everything. Like I did the admin, I did talking to clients on the phone, and I can't do that. So I had an assistant. So I have an assistant who does everything. So now I actually have a lot more free time, and sometimes it can be a little boring. So it's part of the reason why I got into the job is because I think I was age 22. No, it was a bit earlier than that. So I was like just about to turn 22, and I was like really bored with my life, and that's when my friend asked me, if I wanted to do escorting with her. I'm just like, okay, I wasn't expecting this from you, but sure, why not?
Yeah.
Because I just wanted to do something different. So That was
Now,
my main motivator.
what are the laws like down there? I was reading on your blog that brothels are legal, but there are restrictions.
Yeah, there's a lot of restrictions. It doesn't matter what sector of the industry that you work in. There's a lot of restrictions. For instance, brothels, if they were made after I think it's 1996 or 98, they have to have a maximum of 6 rooms. So they can't have like there's two main brothels I think that have more than 6 rooms, and they were the ones that opened up before then. So they have, I think Daily Planet, which is one of the biggest ones, has I think 12 or 13 rooms or something like that. So that's the main restriction. They've also got a restriction on the service provider can provide, and just certain things like that. I'm just trying to think about another law. They can only be built in industrial areas as well.
Oh,
So like
okay.
yeah, yeah, it's just
Yeah.
one of those things, it's a zoning issue. It's, how many rooms, it can be very restrictive, and there's also big restrictions on the way people can advertise as well, which often makes it very hard because in Victoria you can only advertise Head and Shoulders, and a lot of people don't want to show their Head and Shoulders area because that's where their face is.
Right.
So even though that doesn't affect me, because I don't care about my face being in my ads.
Right.
Um, it affects a lot of people that want to keep hidden. So
Yeah. Now, people would think that, well, first of all, do you do private clients as well? Because you take bookings through your website. So I
yep,
read something on your site about how they can't come to your hotel room, which would be safer but not legal, but you can go to theirs, which is less safe but legal.
yeah. So
That's
basically,
bizarre.
what happened is the brothels in Victoria lobbied against the in-call law being introduced,
Okay.
which just means the client can come to you. So you could rent out your own apartment, and you could get the client to come to you. Apparently that was to stop illegal brothels, but that doesn't stop any illegal brothel from ever opening. That is a load of shit. They always exist, despite what people think. They're always around. You just have to walk down like main streets, and you will find one eventually. Um, so that was the reasoning behind it, even though it doesn't take into account the safety of the workers. And yeah, it's just a much safer way to work because you can work in an apartment building which has security. You can buzz people up, and you can see their face and stuff. Because I've worked interstate, I've worked in this environment before,
Mm-hmm.
and it is a lot safer. Like when you are going to someone else's domain, they could have 4 people there with freaking chainsaws, and they could do whatever the hell they wanted to
Mm-hmm.
you. So which is why I have such a stringent screening process. So it's like one of those things where I'm just like, I prefer to do in-calls, but in my state I can't do them. It's as simple as that. So, I know that they do exist and that people are out there breaking the law, but I know the fine
Yeah.
is large, and even though I am in this industry and I can live comfortably off the money that I make, $3,000 fine, I'm not willing to pay that. So I'd prefer to travel interstate.
So they've made it so that it's basically cost prohibitive to do the safest way
Yeah,
of conducting business.
yeah. So that's basically what they did, and it's kind of abhorrent that they would even do that because the statistics are there that it is genuinely safer than going to someone else's place because you don't know, like, most of the time you don't know who they are. Like, I have a strict screening process, and my assistant is a professional stalker, so yeah, that's what I hire her to do. So
Really?
yeah, yeah, I knew her for about 6 months before I actually hired her
Hmm.
because she was running her own washing business, and I hate washing my own clothes. It's terrible.
Yeah.
But that's because I have so much fancy lingerie, and oh my god, I ruined so much. So I'm just like, okay, I'm just gonna give it to someone else to do because I'm just like sick of their shit. So she was doing my washing, and obviously she would pick up, I was at least a stripper or something because I was handing her all these corsets and lingerie. So, eventually she was talking about, needing more money. So I thought about it, and I'm just like, okay, maybe I should offer a position as an assistant because I really need one. And you can't, as a part of the sex work laws in Victoria, you cannot advertise for employees. It doesn't matter in what capacity.
Wow.
So it's such a pain in the ass.
Now, it seems like this entire sex work debate seems to be ignoring safety concerns because they're trying to protect the morality of, women, this idea of exploitation.
hmm
How do you feel about this idea that all sex work contributes to trafficking? What has your experience been, and where do you personally distinguish that consent line is? Like obviously you went into it knowing what you were doing, knowing what you were getting into. It was a choice. For some people it isn't. Where do you see the difference lies?
Um, well, when it comes to talking about trafficking, a lot of people don't realize that a lot of those organizations are supposedly well intentioned. Like they want to help the poor women in the industry. But the reality is most of the statistics are generated by migrant women who have travelled across Australia that want to work.
Mhm.
I have spoken to these women. I have worked with supposedly trafficked workers. They're not trafficked workers, they're migrant women. And I'm sure there is trafficked workers actually genuinely who are forced to do this job. I've never doubted that for a second. I'm sure that there is people out there that have been trafficked. But in Victoria, in the state that I work in, the people that I have talked to, they're all just migrant workers just trying to make a living. And because they're illegal workers, they're seen as trafficked. So a lot of those organisations like to inflate statistics when it comes to trafficked, forced trafficked workers. But the reality is they're not trafficked. They're just migrants. That's it. But out of all the, Asian women, which is very stereotyped that most Asian women are trafficked workers. It's total bullshit. They just want to work for decent money so they can send money home to their family. It's as simple as that. That's just that's the reality of it. It's just they're just there because they want to make money. So
Did
it is kind of sad that they're actually like they hate the fact that everyone thinks that they're like abused victims. Like there's a Thai sex worker organization which called out a radical anti-sex work um, person that I don't like very much because she was calling them cheap pussy and stuff like that, just talking absolute shit about them. But you know what? Who cares if their prices are like lower than other people? It doesn't matter. They're just trying to make a living so they
Mhm.
can send home money to their families.
Yeah.
It's quite sad, really,
Now,
that people have such low of opinion about them because they're just people, really.
now you touched on something I personally observed just this week. I wrote an article about this dancing girl thing at an Xbox event and the fact that they were misclassifying go-go dancers as strippers as if
Mm.
that would make it, somehow bad. But when I wrote the article, this one commenter went on this big tirade of they totally used not strippers and they totally weren't working the pole. And I'm sure they thought that this commenter was a big advocate for justice and freedom and the decency of women. But to me, that just came across as a very hateful comment who is
Mhm.
inherently judging um, a type of work that, I mean, even stripping is legal.
Mhm.
So where do you think this stigma against, even the legal form of sex work that you do comes from?
Mhm. Well, it's a case of how like I see a lot of the discrimination and stigma actually is generated by the media
Okay.
and politicians and the law. So even though I work in a legalized state, there's a lot of things that make it very difficult for me to do my job. So it's seen as like lesser work. So the media talk about us as being trafficked, prostituted women,
Mhm.
even though that's not the case. Where most of us are, you know, people who are just trying to make a living. We're just working. That's basically it. And a lot of the stigma is generated by the media. Um, like a lot of, if you ever read articles about dead sex workers,
Mhm.
you will be disgusted in the way that they talk about them. Like that is their identity according to the media. Like, especially in American articles about, sex workers that have been murdered on the job. They're just like, we should criminalize it because of all these prostituted women, blah, blah, blah. It's just, yeah, most of it's generated by the media. It's quite funny because a lot of people say that it's generated by religion, but it's actually quite funny that people say that because the majority of the accepting people in my life are religious, and the ones that haven't been so accepting are the atheists, which is quite amusing to me. So, and it's just mostly just it's how the media portrays us, really. Because they portray us as all like drug addicted, prostituted, pimps are like controlling us. I'm just like, that's not the case, but that's how they, that's how they get their story across. Is that's how they, generate that, I don't know, oomph of the article. It's basically just pity porn, and I cannot stand that. Like they did do that with like tragedies, which is just they like amp it up and they post terrifying pictures of people where they're like crying and stuff like that. And I'm just like, when I see that sort of stuff, it's just like, it's just the way the media, portrays every situation. It's not just sex work; they do it too.
Now I want to run a common statement I've gotten from people, supposedly caring people who claim to be sex positive but don't want to be anywhere around sex work. To me, they're talking at both sides of their mouth, but I want to see what you think about this statement. The statement is, I have no problem with what a woman wants to do on her own, by her choice. I have a problem the minute she's paid for it. This is something somebody's actually said to me, and they think
what's the difference between unpaid consensual sex and getting paid for it? There is no difference. The only difference is money exchanges hands. That's it. And a lot of people think that when money exchanges hands, that takes away the choice of someone, which is total bullshit. Because I could work for shit wages, like I think the minimum wage here is like $14 an hour. But I could work for those minimum wages and easily, survive. I would be able to survive easily. But I don't want to just survive. I want to be able to pay my debts off, which I basically almost have paid all my debts off. So I'm just not willing to do that. I could easily survive, but no, stuff that. It's just it's an annoying statement. I just think because people like to think that sex work is taking away your choice because money is involved. It's just total nonsense. I don't really know how to explain it beyond that because, apparently poverty drives women into sex work, which in some cases is true because it is such a rewarding career. But if you take that away from those women, what else would they have? What else would they be able to get out of their shit situations with? So there's women out there that do what I call survival sex work, which is, they have to do it to survive. But you would put yourself in front of a bus to save your children, wouldn't you? So going out and having sex for money is a lot better than throwing yourself in front of a bus, don't you think? Yeah. So that's why I absolutely abhor that argument, is that, once it's paid for, you're just a piece of shit scum that, succumbed to the financial wills of the world. And I'm just like, oh, seriously, dude? No. You could look at Walmart workers like that and say that they're like, just there because they're earning money.
Well,
that's it.
You could work at chemists who work around dangerous chemicals, or miners that are breathing in, dust that destroys their lungs. To me, these are more inherently dangerous jobs than the basics of sex work. I think the fact that it's driven underground is what makes it more dangerous, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Absolutely, 100%. That is what makes it more dangerous, is the criminal aspect. I've talked to women that have actually been assaulted before. I've had my assault experiences, but I don't really classify them as like, the worst of the worst. They were just, dickheads,
No, bad
basically.
dates
I've
won't
dealt with
see again.
dickheads.
Yeah, yeah.
So I've heard of experiences of like women actually being, like drugged and raped and, just lovely stuff that is just fucked.
Hmm.
And in certain states, actually, this is a good story. In Victoria, because in-calls are illegal, a lot of women don't want to bring forth the cases, even though they know who the client is, because of the illegal status of in-calls. Women are not willing to go and report this scum of the earth because of the in-call status, because they will be prosecuted for it.
Huh.
And prosecuting women who are coming forward about rape is just fucked up. Like, that is the one thing that really bugs me. And even when I had my case of, I had a client hold me down and punch me in the back of the head, and he was a prick.
Hmm.
Um, I didn't want to, this is back before my entire family knew what I did and all my friends.
Hmm.
I didn't want to drag my name through the courts over this one scumbag, so I didn't report him, and I feel bad that I didn't, because literally 2 weeks later, everyone knew what I did.
Really?
And I regret it deeply. I should have gone to the police. I shouldn't have been such a pussy and
Yeah.
gone to the police about it, because I just didn't want my name dragged through the courts, because that's what happens when that
Yeah.
sort of stuff
Oh,
happens.
we just had a major court ruling today that was exactly that. A guy was hitting women, claiming it was consensual, but he was cleared on everything, and their names have been ruined because there were inconsistencies in their statements, and the judges was, well, you're a liar. And obviously that's a serious, serious thing. And I think cases like this show to me that sex work doesn't put you in harm's way any more than any sexual situation would. It's called intimacy for a reason, correct?
Yeah.
Now, does it
Like, I've been,
still?
I've been in the industry almost 3 years, right? And
Right.
out of the entire time, I've only ever had two bad clients. And, I've worked in retail before, and I was punched in the face in retail.
Yep.
So I'm just like, I've actually experienced worse in retail, because I got punched directly in the face and I had like black eye and everything. It was shit.
Yeah.
So, when I got punched at work, it really wasn't that hard. He was just doing it to like try and get me to be more submissive. I'm just
Hmm.
like,
Hmm.
no, that's not how this works. So it's just, some clients just don't really understand boundaries all that well,
Yeah.
especially when they're limited English or they're from another culture, and that's just how they are.
Hmm.
So I'm very assertive, so it doesn't happen to me very often. I know there's other women that have had more struggles with clients, um, because they're less assertive, but
Yeah.
because I'm assertive, I'm very good at controlling the situation.
Oh God,
So
even
I
working
got very good
bars.
very quickly.
Yeah. Even working bars, you have to be assertive or people take liberties. I mean, that was something I learned fast. You
Yeah,
have to sort of control the conversation and control your environment, let them sort of know. Saying who's boss is wrong, but I mean, in your situation, it's probably right. You're the professional, you're the one being paid for your service. It's no different than a hairdresser or an esthetician or a lawyer. In that way, you're expected to be the expert in what you do.
yeah. So basically, when it comes to like difficult clients, I have this strategy called redirection. I
Hmm.
never actually explicitly say no. I say, let's do something else that is more fun. So I always, give them the option of doing something more fun than something that hurts me. So,
I guess that's a look into the very detailed psychology of what you do, because they are paying for a good time, and there's a
yeah.
huge emotional and psychological element that's probably what they're paying for even more than the mechanical sex. Is that right?
Yeah, sometimes I feel like a counselor.
I
Yeah.
hear that from a lot of sex workers. That's pretty consistent across the board.
Especially people in sexless marriages, it does sound bad that I'm seeing married clients, but, everyone does it in
I
the
think
industry.
that that's one of those things that I sort of feel, as a person who's been married for quite a while. If somebody's going to go and do that, it makes more sense to hire a professional who won't get the wrong idea than someone who is going to get entangled and cause a whole bunch of problems and a whole bunch of embarrassment for the spouse and have the whole thing blow up. I mean, in terms of harm reduction, to me, it sounds like a better option.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely, especially when it's in a decriminalized state. It's a lot safer. Like the health outcomes for the workers, like they're more likely to get tested.
Hmm.
In New South Wales, where they don't actually have testing laws, so they're more likely to go get tested because they don't have the the looking down on them sort of thing. Is, if do you have an STI? They're more likely to look after themselves if they don't have that. That's the funny thing, because it's part of being a professional. You don't want to pass something on to your clients, so you go get tested to make sure you don't. So it's, yeah, New South Wales actually has by far the best health outcomes for women.
Interesting.
Um, in Victoria, for example, a lot of women don't seem to get tested as much as they should. And they can also do a thing which is shit. I've heard about it in the industry where they go and get their test done.
Hmm.
And a lot of people don't realize is the piece of paper that they get is not actually the test results. You can still work in the industry without your test results. It's fucked up in every single way. But you can go to the doctor and go just get your blood drawn and your swabs and you do your urines, and you could just leave that clinic and not go back for the results. So you could work theoretically for years with an STI, and it never inhibits you from working. But as soon as you go back for the test results and you know that you have an STI, that
Hmm.
is when you are breaking the law. So,
Ooh,
yeah.
that's not good.
Yeah.
Huh.
That is a major flaw in the Victorian sex industry policy is you just need a certificate of attendance, not your actual results. So,
Wow.
yeah.
That's a huge loophole.
Yeah.
Now,
It's pretty fucked up, and a lot of clients think that they're, so safe because all the workers get tested. I'm just like, no, there's no such thing as safe sex. There is only safer sex.
that's a very pragmatic approach. Now, is there a
Yeah.
difference for you in sex you have for work and sex you have for fun?
Difficult question because I don't really get. I don't really go out of my way to, do stuff in my private life. Although it has happened.
Hmm.
Um, for the most part, not really.
Hmm.
The only difference is the emotional aspect. Like the person that you're intimate with, and you know them on a personal level, and it can be a lot more intimate to play with a partner that you know you're not getting paid for.
Hmm.
But you can also have amazing, intimate, sensual fun with a client, and it's like basically no different. But it's just sex. It doesn't matter if you're doing it for money or you're doing it for fun.
Hmm.
It's just sex.
But you do enjoy the stuff you paid to do.
Oh yeah, definitely. There's plenty of things that I enjoy, and the only when you look at my services on my website, because I've got it all clearly defined, because
Hmm.
I'm very open and honest about what I provide. I only put stuff that I would genuinely enjoy doing on my website. So I don't ever put something that I'm not comfortable with doing. For example, a common kink service is called sounding, where it's an insertion into the guy's member.
Hmm.
Just to give a kind of example. Um, and I'm not comfortable with doing it because I have never undergone BDSM training, and I'm also not willing to do it because I haven't done it. It's not something I am personally comfortable with doing. I'm not going to do it. There's plenty of other things that I'm not comfortable with. Like I'm not comfortable being submissive. Like I'm not comfortable being in handcuffs. Being
Hmm.
put in a position where I can't control the situation. I'm not comfortable with being tied up. Those sorts of things. Um, it's just a case of what I'm willing to provide. It's stuff that I would normally do in my private sex life,
Hmm.
basically.
Okay, now
I
that
never do anything that I'm not willing to do in my private life.
this pivots to sort of prostitution, depictions of prostitution in video games,
Mhm.
and this idea that a prostitute in a video game is inherently some sort of object, or the buzzword is background decoration. And I know people are waiting for me to get to this question.
Mhm.
um, do how do you feel? I mean, the games you played didn't have this content in it, but it's sort of hard to not be aware of the phenomenon. So I guess it's a two-part question. How do you feel about the depiction of prostitution in the video games that you're aware of? And then how do you feel about how the media has portrayed and how critics have responded to the depictions of prostitution in video games?
Uh, I'm kind of like, as I told you before we started, um, the media is actually responsible for a lot of how sex workers slash prostitutes slash whatever you want to call them are depicted, because they say that we're all trafficked women, that we're all raped, we had no choice in the industry, blah blah blah, we have no agency, we're all controlled by pimps and freaking brothel owners, and you know we work for ourselves. In some areas, pimps, they do have control, and that's because of the criminalized status.
Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't have that control if it wasn't for it being criminal, because that's what they are. They're criminals. They're taking advantage of basically vulnerable women, because there
Mm-hmm.
is a lot of women in the industry that actually are quite vulnerable. Like, they've got addictions. Even though addictions aren't, I don't say that they're inherently a part of the industry, because addictions are everywhere.
Yes.
Like, you could be a freaking, you could be a doctor or a lawyer and be addicted to cocaine.
Yep.
So it's just like, addiction is everywhere. It's not just, of course it has that. It's in the sex industry. I've heard stories in the sex industry about drug use, but it's not. There's plenty of women that don't do it
Mm-hmm.
while on drugs. For
Mm-hmm.
instance, me, I've never taken a substance on work besides caffeine. So, now as for the portrayal of women in fiction or video games, um, I was a big nerd when I was younger. I read a lot of books and watched a lot of TV, watched a lot of movies, anime, played a lot of games. Now, as a sex worker, I actually have never felt like it was a bad thing how they portray it in games,
Mm-hmm.
because that's the reality for some women out there. They're portraying actually the real lives. Like, there was this one clip in the background decoration video of Anita Sarkeesian where they were talking about the women who was just like, oh yeah, I might give you a freebie. There's actually women like that I have met in
Yep.
the industry that are like that.
Yep.
And they're actually taking away from those experiences of the women who are like that,
Yep.
who are, paid sluts, is
Yep.
basically what I call them. They actually really enjoy their job, and that's what they get off to it. And I'm just like, you're taking away from those experiences, and you're basically saying that they shouldn't write about it. And for me, no topic, absolutely no topic, should ever be censored. And I
Yep.
don't care what it is. It could be GTA, for example, where you go and kill the hookers and get your money back.
Mm-hmm.
That is something that does actually happen,
Yep.
where people actually murder the escort, sex worker, street worker,
Mm-hmm.
whatever the situation is.
Mm-hmm.
They actually do that. There is, a history of people actually taking advantage of the fact that they fly under the radar, because it's so criminalized and stigmatized. They fly under the radar. So
Yep.
serial killers have actually taken advantage of the fact that they fly under the radar and murder them, and that's how they get away with it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of those situations where I'm just like, well, no topic is, because I'm like pro free speech, blah blah blah,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think that any topic should be, treated as a taboo topic. Because I've read, I've watched and read like fucked up movies. Like, I'm a big fan of Stanley Kubrick, and his themes in his movies are quite dark. And
Yes.
I don't ever want to be in the position where I wouldn't be able to enjoy a media that has said things in it. And like, even as a sex worker, I play GTA.
Mm-hmm.
I've gone down and freaking, I've done it. Like,
Really?
I still go down to where the hookers are and I go and kill them and get my money back.
Really?
Because it is literally a mechanic of the game, and I don't take pleasure out of it. It's just it's a game.
Right.
So it's just one of those situations where I'm just like, it's a game. It
See,
doesn't bother me.
the thing
The real thing that affects us as sex workers is the criminalized status, not the freaking games. It just
yeah.
does my head in when people claim that the games are what makes violence. No, it's a criminalized status. That is what people take advantage of, is the fact that we're criminals and we can't actually go to the police. It's just I've never blamed games for it.
See, my
I've
my
never.
thing, my struggle with the Grand Theft Auto games is I know personally the thing about killing prostitutes or killing civilians in those games completely. For me, the entertainment value has nothing to do with I'm gonna go kill a hooker. The ragdoll physics are funny. And so there's an element of slapstick to it where
Yeah.
in my brain, I'm not having fun killing people. It's almost like I'm in one of those Bugs Bunny cartoons, right? Because the physics aren't realistic. They sort of fly like they're on the cushion of air and like cartwheel like that naked guy in the Metal Gear games. And I'm I don't know how to feel about that because it does have nothing to do with the actual, real life equivalent of the action and everything to do with how they've made it cartoonish in those particular
Yeah.
games. But the other thing about prostitutes, my pet peeve about prostitutes in games is except for I can think of one game and only one game, and that's the Witcher series that had a prostitute in it that wasn't like skinny, twig-legged. They all look very, like it's very much that Hollywood beauty myth. And
Mm-hmm.
my experiences with people in sex work in the real world has been, you guys look like every other, group of women out there. You are all different shapes, sizes, and colors. And the spectrum of what men find attractive is much greater than
Mm-hmm.
what media would give us the perception men are looking for. So I wonder if you could give us your thoughts on that.
Well, I'm of the opinion that it's a fantasy game,
Mm-hmm.
so people can portray their characters however they want. I've always abhorred the arguments about realistic depictions of women's bodies, especially when it comes to like people like Lara Croft, for example. She's a fit woman.
Yeah.
That's what she does. She does basically wall acrobatics where she's going like crazy. So when they're talking about just like athletic women and posting pictures of them as more realistic shape, that's
Mm-hmm.
bullshit.
Yeah.
I was a gymnast when I was 12. That is what my figure looked like. I had boobs and I was skinny and there was nothing to me and I had the thigh gap and I had everything. I used to be that size. And now as a size, pretty much almost a size 18 woman, the
Mm-hmm.
complete opposite side of the spectrum, I can still say, without a doubt, I don't really care about how they portray sizes. If they want to just have skinny women in their game, it's their prerogative. I'm not offended if they don't put, a BBW hooker in the game. I don't really care. It's just
Oh,
one of those
I just
situations I just don't care about.
Yeah, I just think
So,
it's bad business because the spectrum of what men are attracted to is much greater than that. Like they're actually games are supposed to be about choice, and they're not
yeah,
offering people who are attracted to women enough variety in the women who are sort of
I wish they did have more options for character design. Like, I found whenever I make video game characters that I want to make them have like huge boobs
yeah.
and like, ghetto booty. Like, I just want a big round booty. I
I
can't
want to
do
be
that.
able to run.
That frustrates
Yeah.
me because I want to design the character how I want to design it. If it's character selection,
Yeah.
it bugs me because I want to be able to make the character how I want it.
Yeah.
But in terms of like NPCs and that stuff, it doesn't bother me. Like, it's art. I just think of it, if we're dictating what they're doing, we're basically controlling their art, and that pisses me off because I've done artistic things in the past, and I don't want someone sitting over my shoulder going,
Of course.
"You have to make that woman a bigger ass. Otherwise, I don't like you.
Yeah.
That sort of thing, it just shits me. Like, people saying, you should have written the story this way. I'm just like, no, it's their story. If you don't like it, you can easily go play another thing or read another book or watch another anime. There's plenty of options out there. If you don't like it, go do something else. You don't have to give them their money. If you don't like the fact there's no fucking fat hookers in the game, go play another game. It's just not something that's ever actually affected me.
Right.
And, this is coming from someone who is a fat hooker, and I don't really care. It's just one of those situations where I'm just like, if you don't want to put a big woman in your game, it's not an issue for me.
Right.
I like playing, like Angela White style chicks, because that's what I'm attracted to. I like skinny waist, big butts, big tits. That's just what I like when I'm playing video game characters. So that's just the whole, fantasy element. I just want to look like that when I'm playing my video game.
Mm-hmm.
So it's never affected me, to be honest.
Now, this comes into this whole issue of self-esteem because we have a lot of similar opinions on these things, and I know when I was younger, I had a very different approach to these things. I was very threatened, and I know through my own journey that that's because I hadn't fully come into my own. I didn't have the same amount of confidence. I wasn't as comfortable with myself, and you obviously have to have a lot of confidence to be good at what you do. So,
Really?
well,
Not really.
no, not
It's
really.
okay to make it till you make it, because when I got into the industry, I had very low self-esteem. I wasn't feeling good about myself. I didn't think that I would ever make money in the industry, and that's a total lie that I had myself thinking. My friend who I started working with, she was thinner, she had bigger boobs, she was blonde, and I was working with her, and we were making basically the same amount of money.
Yeah, but
So,
what skills were useful? Like, what actually does matter in your line of work?
well, it's funny because, even the most, re- the most media hyped standard of beauty,
Mm-hmm.
um, it's not actually a factor, it's the service that people are looking for. Like, often they will look for a particular type of women, but even if they don't have, one thing, like they don't have a humongous ass, but they've got a good service, the client will often book the girl with the better service than, going to see someone who offers a shit service but has a particular type of body that they want. Even though there's some people out there that are like that and just pick the best looking girl, for the media beauty standards. That's that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, often it's service quality. Like, I know this woman who lost over 100 kilos, and she in her words, this is not my words,
Mm-hmm.
she apparently looks like a melting candle. She is the biggest earner that I've ever worked with. She has game. Like, she has serious game. She is good at what she does. She provides a good service. She makes the client feel good about themselves. That is what is needed in the industry. Even though she has had the negative experiences of clients,
Mm-hmm.
bolting on her because her body's not the greatest. She's had those good experiences, and yeah, it's a fact of, she provides a very, very, very good service. Mine pales in comparison to her, because she's so much better at the redirection tactic, which she gets them to do something more fun.
But again,
So,
doesn't that come back to you need a certain amount of sense of yourself in order to be good at that? Because that takes a ton of inner calm to be able to do that redirection. Because I have to do that a lot in my job too, and I know if I'm feeling shaky that day, I'm nowhere near as good at
yeah,
that skill as when I'm feeling more
definitely.
confident.
Um, yeah, she's just, her self-esteem is not the greatest because she had a lot of surgeries, and she actually feels worse after the surgery, because she's
Really?
got such bad surgical scars.
Yeah.
It's a case of she really never got over being a fat person. She never, you know, she still needs to get help because she still eats the way she does. She just had a gastric bypass, so that's how she lost all the weight. It's not. I don't believe that gastric bypass is the way out of obesity. I think it's a case of um, it's really a mental thing. Like for me, the reason why I am the way that I am is because I have severe phobia, and a lot of people don't realize that. They think I'm just like fat and lazy and just sit around eating hamburgers. But the reality is sometimes I don't eat for like 6, 7, 8 hours. And because I don't eat for that extended period of time, when I do, I retain all of the bad stuff that I do eat, which I do eat badly
Hmm.
because I'm very fussy about what I eat because of my emetophobia, which is basically an extreme fear of vomiting. So I'm very fussy about what I eat, and it has has had a detrimental effect on my health and my weight. But I've also gone through periods of my life where I was so skinny. This is when I was a gymnast. I was so skinny because I was barely eating.
Hmm.
Um, and basically, you probably could have considered me anorexic back
Hmm.
then
And that
because
affects your metabolism.
it does.
Yeah.
So basically, when I turned 16 and I had my own money and I was just buying the food that I wanted to eat, it just ballooned. And I
Yeah.
basically went from like being a size 6 to 8, which is like skinny in
Hmm.
Australian sizes. That's like the skinniest of the skinny to a size 18 in the space of like 7 years. So it's just one of those things that just a lot of people don't realize that it's actually like there's other elements of the reason why people are overweight. It's not just a case of they're fat and lazy. There's often a mental health
Hmm.
aspect to it. Like mine is definitely a mental health thing. Um, and there's also a lot of people don't realize that it's for a lot of people it's also binge eating. It's
Hmm.
not the same as bulimia or going on a binge. It's that they eat like binges all the time, and they emotionally eat, and it's not something that you can cure just by getting a fucking surgery. It just
Hmm.
doesn't happen.
Hmm.
Like this woman that I'm speaking about, she often eats to the point where she throws up on a pretty regular basis.
Hmm.
Because her gastric bypass doesn't allow her to eat like
Yes.
bread, which swells. So she never actually changed. She's still the same person, but she's just a lot thinner because of the surgery.
Yeah.
So she actually, like, even after all those surgeries, she still feels shitty about herself. And that's
Now,
because nothing ever changed. She just
yeah.
got skinnier, that's it.
Now this gets into the complexities of confidence because
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know I get into a headspace when I'm working
Mm-hmm.
and I can do things when I'm in job mode that if I'm just hanging out, out at a pub with friends or something like that, there's no way in hell I'd ever do that. It's a different mindset. And
Yeah.
do you have a sort of different, I don't want to say character, but it kind of is a different headspace than you're working than when you're just sort of off the clock?
Um, for some people, yes. For
Yeah.
me, not really. I've always been the sort of person that sends boobs and stuff on Snapchat.
Hmm.
I've never, of course, when I work, it is a more exaggerated form of myself, but it's
Hmm.
still me. It's just a little bit more
Right.
booby
Right.
sometimes. um, my confidence when I started working was pretty low. Like I was just like, oh my god, nobody's ever gonna want to book me, blah blah blah. I look, I don't know what I'm thinking, a dugong, like
Hmm.
a friggin' mammoth of a beast. I'm just like, no, I'm just gonna go do it and I'll see how it works out. Well, funny thing is in a lot of different cultures, bigger women are actually seen as like, wow, yes, big women, which is, but it's that way for a lot of India. I don't know, like pointing out races, but
Well,
Indian
we're
and
not
Middle
really
Eastern,
pointing out races. It's cultural,
but
which is different.
yeah,
Yeah.
so Middle Eastern clients and Indian clients often like the more curvaceous figure. So a lot of my clients are Middle Eastern or Indian, and that's to me like the biggest compliment is they genuinely like the bigger women, and you can
Was
tell when they're in the room with you, you can tell they genuinely love bigger women, and that's what I like.
That's kind
That
of
gave
hard
me
to fake in
confidence
your
in
line of work.
because I knew after being in the industry for a couple of months that there is guys out there that actually like it. So
Was that a surprise?
um, not really because I did know about the existence of the like curvier BBW porn, that's how I advertise myself as, is just a BBW. Even though technically I'm actually too small to be a BBW, I'm also too big for the guys that want athletic. So it's just like, so I'm in the middle.
Right.
So that's why I advertise myself as a curvy BBW escort, because that just means I'm like in the middle. So I would prefer just to call myself curvy, but a lot of guys think that curvy just means skinny with big boobs and a big butt. And even women think that. So, but the reality is curvy or voluptuous actually just means a waist that's 10 inches smaller than either your bust or your hips. So my hips are 49 inches and my waist is 35. So that technically makes me pear-shaped. So even though I've got like humongous boobs on my chest, it still makes me pear-shaped because my hips are larger than my boobs.
Yeah.
So
I can relate to that that as well. Yeah. But you're really getting into sort of the complexities of what we know intellectually and sort of our reactions to situations involving attractiveness, because you got into that thing of, you knew these BBW sites existed, but you didn't think anybody was going to specifically accept you that way when you got into the business. Why do you think we struggle? I mean, I hate the "as a woman, what do you think" kind of thing. But just from a personal perspective as an individual, where do you think that disconnect comes from?
it's a difficult one, but I actually have like a point of view that I can offer
Mm-hmm.
on this one. I've had friends of mine, because I'm so open with my job and everything. I've had friends of mine come and talk to me about, potentially getting into the sex industry, even though none of them have actually done it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them have talked about their self-esteem and, the fact that they didn't think that they would make money. And I'm just like, honey, you could be like the biggest women in the place, but people will still book you because they want a bigger woman. Even, if you've got, I've walked into work sometimes. This is really bad because I'm obsessed with my personal appearance now. But back when I was working in the brothels, I didn't really care that much. So I'd rock up with like mangled toenails, bad hands. Now that I am an escort, I do pay attention to my nails and my toenails and how my hair looks and all these things. But I used to rock up and my toenails looked like crap, and I still got booked. It doesn't matter what I look like. How feral. Like, I walked out in my fucking pajamas, my Hello Kitty pajamas, and I got booked. Sometimes the guys don't care. They just want tits and arms. That's all they want. They don't care if you're in PJs with no makeup. They'll still book you.
Some guys may like the kawaii brothel. Who knows?
Exactly. So I just tell people, I'm just like, it's really not about what you look like, it's what you can offer them.
No,
So
I mean, obviously, you're painting a picture for viewers here that is totally different than the narrative of, this misogynistic dominance of women by men in sex work. So I don't know if there's an answer to this question, but where do you think we start sort of merging the depictions, the art surrounding sex work with something, and I won't say the realities because art is not reality, we've discussed this, but something that's more meaningful, like something that actually says something, as opposed to just, oh, there's another tits on stilts who is the role of the interchangeable prostitute today will be played by blonde woman. Like, where do we start doing better with our art?
well, I don't think people really need to do better. I just think I would like to see, I hate saying this, but I would like to see, more, if they're going to have hookers in the game, I would like it to be a more realistic example. Like, for instance, let's talk about the show Satisfaction, which is an Australian TV drama about working in a brothel.
Mm-hmm.
All of them were skinny, all of them were blonde, all of them were making mega bucks. That is total fucking bullshit. Some days you could be sitting in the parlor and you could make absolutely no money. That is just something that happens. There might not be no client. There might be no clients coming in. It might not be your day. You're just not feeling great. You've got a cold or something like that, and you're working even though you shouldn't be. It's just one of those situations. Like, it's just not how reality is portrayed. But I don't think that they need to portray reality. But I would like to see more realistic, just because I've worked in it and I know the realities of it. I would just like it to be a little bit more realistic, for them to actually do their research. But, I don't expect everyone to research, the intricacies of working in a brothel over a video game which is about, stealth warfare, basically. If Metal Gear Solid had hookers in it, I wouldn't expect them to go like super in depth into it. I'd be just like, okay, there's hookers, whatever. If it was a game about, I don't know, like managing a brothel, then I would expect them to do a little bit more research into the sex industry and the type of people that are in the sex industry. Just like, for instance, someone writing a crime drama that's never worked in the police force before, I would expect them to do research.
Yeah.
That's just how it is. If it's a game about something completely different, I don't expect them to do research on it. But yeah, a show like Satisfaction pisses me off because they just didn't know how it works.
Yeah.
There's not just skinny blonde women. That's completely ridiculous, because I've worked at these places that they basically were trying to depict, and that's just not how it is. Like, even at the nicest brothel, which is the highest rate, which is Gotham City in Melbourne, they've got all types of women. All types. Skinny, every type of race has worked there. They've got big, small, just every type. It's just, they're very strict on appearance. So, like, you have to have perfect nails, perfect toenails, perfect hair. Your hair has to be, like, on point. Your makeup has to be on point. That is the reality of working at one of the nicest parlors in Melbourne. But, it still wasn't, even though it was supposed to be depicting a nice brothel, it still wasn't the reality of working in a nice brothel. So just like, they've still got all types of women. It's just the standard is higher. So your appearance is held more to held higher up on the scale. You just got to, put the extra effort in to make the extra money. That's basically how that place worked.
Oh, makes sense. You're selling a fantasy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I've worked at both places. I've worked at places where I've made $300 an hour, and I worked at places where, well, it's $300 an hour total, so the house still takes the money.
Right.
Some of the money. And I've also worked at $175 an hour, which is, bottom of the barrel. You make $110 in an hour. That's what the worker gets, and the house gets the rest of it. I've worked at those places.
Now, how many hours? How many hours would you expect to work in a day? Right.
Depends on the place. They can't technically make you work any length of shift. You could easily leave and go to the next one if they did make you do a long shift. The longest shift I've ever done was 16 hours.
Wow.
And that's because I wanted to. Because they had no other women on shift. It was busy, and I was making bank. I ended up leaving with $1,350 around that in one shift. And I barely survived that shift.
I think there are a lot of car salesmen that are thinking of change of career now. Because, I mean, I worked in the car industry, and that the unpredictability of sales work is just constant across the board. That's not something.
It's the same with sex work, basically. Yep. You're an independent contractor. You don't make a flat rate. You stand around in the brothel, or you sit around on the internet trying to get clients. That's just the reality of it. It's basically just sales with pussy. So that's what I call it.
Yeah. Now, you talked on your blog, this was a very interesting article to me, about women who want to transition out of sex work and have trouble because they have a gap in their resume.
Yeah.
And this, I'd never thought about that before, but you're right. And this is something I think people need to know about, because when we all start going, oh, they're so exploited and this is so terrible. Well, this is society contributing to a level of marginalization. It's not exploitation, it's marginalization. But people seem to think it's okay. You can claim to be anti-marginalization, anti-exploitation of sex work, but then it's like, well, I won't hire one. And that
Yeah,
sounds
exactly.
so,
That was the point of the article, basically, is there's so many people out there that would never, for instance, hire someone with tattoos or piercings or an ex-sex worker, which really, actually does my head in, because sex workers, some of the, they can be the best salesmen that you could hire, and you will not hire them because they used to be a hooker, which is why a lot of people won't put their previous industry experience on their resume,
mhm,
even though it's actually really good. For instance, I would hire an ex-sex worker for a assistant position, even though I haven't hired one.
I've
I would
I've
still,
hired
I would
I've
still consider hiring an ex-sex worker
yeah.
to be my assistant. But at the time, I didn't have anyone that I thought that I could hire, because I only know women that are currently in the industry. So
Mhm.
I hired someone who's not in the industry, and it worked out fine.
See,
But I
I've
would still be very into it.
see I've hired past sex workers, have hired current sex workers. Like I knew what they were doing after hours, and some of them were great employees. Some of them were not as good employees, but that's people,
That's
right?
people.
Yeah. And I have concerns, especially in the video game industry, because of the doublethink on this issue. And this is why I was so eager to have you on. I was afraid I was coming on too strong because I'm like, oh, person. But there's this whole thing of we care about women and we want to attract women into gaming. But then we lose our collective shit whenever the idea of a sex worker is involved. And I personally think that a lot of the people who have the spine for what working in the games industry entails, because you're selling a fantasy. It's a sales job. You're going to have to deal with a lot of deeply personal criticism about intimate things because it's art that you have to find a way to push through. These are all skills that are developed through sex work. So I'm really concerned about this stigmatization and the disappearance of sex work from our content, because I can't help believe that that is showing a stigma against sex workers in the real world.
Yeah.
And, whatever you think about the morality of a given situation, anything that doesn't treat people like people is bad. But I'm encountering this really rigid, intractable doublethink in people's minds where they think it makes absolute sense to say, I respect sex workers, I just don't want them around me. And then you get into, it would be bad for our brand, what would other women think. There's this idea that sex workers make other women uncomfortable.
Mhm.
And I don't understand this. Have you encountered this?
I actually have had situations where women are intimidated or feel often weird around me because they think,
Really?
I might try and steal their boyfriends or something, which, I have no intention of doing. I don't give a shit about your boyfriend. He's fucking broke. So I'm just not interested. I'm not interested in your boyfriend because he's not going to pay me.
Is
So
that what it
he's,
is?
yeah, that's basically what it is. It's an intimidation thing. They're often intimidated by very sexually aggressive women. And that's basically what I am, is I'm a sexually aggressive woman who gets what she wants. So people think that I'm going to be sexually aggressive towards their partner, or they've never encountered, which I find is more often the case, have never actually encountered a sex worker before and they've never met one in real life. And that's a very common thing because a lot of people aren't willing to tell people that they're sex
Yeah,
workers.
yeah. Well,
So, it's definitely intimidation and lack of knowledge that's the biggest ones.
so you actually think this is a lack of knowledge, a lack of exposure?
Oh, well, so many people, I get so many questions from people when they find out what I do because they've never met a sex worker before. And I've only met one person out of my friends group that has had relations slash friends slash whatever with a sex worker. One.
Hmm.
One. And, okay, this is just, in terms of, like, escorting sex work prostitution. I do have friends that are strippers,
Hmm.
but they've never, gone into my side of the industry. They've
Right.
never experienced it, even though they tend to be interconnected because
Hmm.
some escorts are strippers, some strippers, do other endeavors. some cam girls, for example, or also escorts on the side. So it's just one of those things that it just people don't encounter people like that every day. It's a fringe way of living, which is why I'm obsessed with fringe documentaries like Deadliest Catch. I like to watch things that a lot of people don't get to do. So when people come across something that they've never come across before, like an escort, they often like freak out, or they've got a lot of questions, or they treat you like shit because they're intimidated by you and they don't actually know the reality of it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the honest truth of how people react to it. And also, I think a lot of it is generated again by the media, treating us like basically pieces of shit, scum of the earth. That's what they do. Like, it's in their best interest to peddle the uh, what's the word for it? To peddle the interests of the interest groups,
Mm-hmm.
specifically driving towards criminalization, or the Nordic model, which is criminalization of clients. Um, they're trying to drive those policies. That's what they want. Like organizations like Project Respect, which is now no longer, it doesn't exist. They peddle the Nordic model, which
Mm-hmm.
is awful. It's not a good thing at all to criminalize clients, because you can't criminalize either side without affecting the other.
We have that
So,
model essentially in Canada, and that's
yeah,
what they're finding is that
yeah, and
you criminalize one side of the transaction, you attract crime. It
yeah,
becomes in the
exactly.
sphere of criminal, and then you get into organized crime, and you get into the drug trade, and you get into all that stuff. And I I am increasingly in agreement with you that it doesn't work. Having seen
It
how it
does.
works here, yeah.
It, another thing with the Nordic model is they also criminalize brothel keepers and pimps. Um, it's a common misconception that pimps are often violent and abusive and make you take drugs and stuff like that, because my escort driver, for example, would be seen as a pimp
That's a
in
good point.
in the Nordic model, and it could be just the partner of the person that's doing the work, because I've met people like that before. Their partners drive them to their jobs.
Yeah, well,
It
they're
could be
your
my escort
security
driver.
system.
It could be, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
they're a
It
deterrent.
could
They're a
be
deterrent
just
tactic.
yeah. And it could be just they're an employee or an employer, and they're seen as pimps. And even people who rent out properties to women in Sweden often kick them out because they're operating their business inside there, and that would mean that they're a brothel keeper or a brothel manager.
Hmm.
So there's women being kicked out of housing, which obviously makes it women difficult for women, especially with kids, um, to be able, like, even if you're just a sex worker and you are renting a property and the owner knows what you do, technically they could still be charged for brothel keep. Oh no, making money off a sex worker. That's the one.
Hmm.
Making money off a sex worker. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, if you have no relation to their industry at all, if you are making money off a sex worker, that's crime in Sweden. So it's like completely ridiculous, because they're a fucking landlord. They're not a
Yeah,
pimp. So
yeah.
all these people are seen as pimps because they take money off you, even though they're not related to the industry at all. It's ridiculous, which is why the Nordic model, it will never work. It's never going to work. No denomination of it at all is going to help anyone. The only way to help women in the industry, trans workers in the industry, men in the industry, is to completely decriminalize it, because that is the only way to reduce the stigma and people thinking of you as criminals, because that's a lot of what it is they think of you as criminals. Even in Victoria, I get seen as a criminal because they're always thinking that I'm going to break the law, blah blah blah. So it's the criminalized status that just makes people abhor you so much, because you're a criminal. You're not a person. You're just a criminal doing illegal things. And even for the clients, for example, where they don't criminalize sex workers, they criminalize the client, you're still performing an illegal transaction because the client is a criminal. So it's like, it's completely ridiculous to criminalize the clients. And it makes it a lot more difficult for the women to do screening as well, which is
Yes.
basically stalking. Um, So you stalk the clients and you ask them questions
Yeah.
like often women will ask for ID or a deposit or more information about themselves, like where they work, blah blah blah, so they don't get axe murdered.
Right.
Um, so that's and a lot of clients aren't willing to answer those questions when they're criminalized.
Hmm.
They won't do that unless, of course, you are a very well you got a good reputation as an escort. They won't give you that information, and often it's hard to establish yourself as an escort with a good reputation, especially in criminalized times. And that's really the reality of it. You can't criminalize a consensual sexual act. It's completely ridiculous
Well,
to.
I think there are some people that if they could, they would. There's this real social drive in
There's
certain
so many
areas.
criminalize the industry, and
Yeah.
they're doing it every day. There's
Yeah.
so many organizations like Pink Cross, Project Respect, all those organizations that are just like, oh, women in the industry are victims. There was this organization at Sexpo, which is a very positive place for sex,
Hmm.
and there was these fucking bitches just standing there saying, oh, 68,000 women in the industry are prostituted, they're all victims of abuse, they're all single mothers. I'm just like, who cares if they're a single mother?
Well, yeah, that one of those things is not like the others there.
It's completely ridiculous. And they was standing there, and they made so many of the women, because a lot of people that go to Sexpo are in the sex industry, or
Yeah.
they're swingers, or they're just there
Yeah.
to, have
Yeah,
a
yeah,
good
yeah.
time. Um, they made people cry. They were telling them that, they're basically forced into it, blah, blah, blah. They've got no decision in it. And I know these women that were speaking out against the Pink Cross and the fact that they were at this event. And they had the most choice in the world, and they had these pieces of shit saying you had no choice in the matter, blah blah blah. All men are disgusting for going to sex workers. I'm just like, oh my god. And when I heard these stories on Twitter, I actually went up to them, picked up a ton of the brochures, tore them, and threw them at them because I was genuinely that pissed off that
Yeah.
they would come to sex and treat workers with such utter disrespect. And that's what I find funny about Project Respect is they seem like a well-intentioned organization on the surface. They look like, pro-sex work, we
Hmm.
want decriminalization for sex workers, which the Nordic model is not decriminalization. That's a load of fucking shit. Sorry
Yeah,
about language, but it is a load of shit because
it's
you're still
recrafting the
criminalizing the
criminalization.
transaction.
Yeah. Yep.
So
Yeah.
um,
The the
it's
thing
not decriminalization.
the thing that frustrates me is that television and film make a lot of money using prostitutes as cannon fodder, and video games to the same extent. We got to lump Grand Theft Auto and things like that in there.
Mm-hmm.
The number of prostitutes that get killed by people in CSI or Criminal Minds, things like that. It's a weekly thing. A hooker dies on TV, or a stripper or something like that. But they are making millions and millions and millions of dollars off an industry they turn their nose up at.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't see this as wrong. And this is something I care very much about because of, my own experiences in going in knowing absolutely nothing about sex work or the people who did it and coming out going, you know what? These are, I found working with porn stars and dancers and things like that, they were some of the most authentic people I have ever met because they have to
Mm-hmm.
cut the bullshit. You don't make money if you bullshit in sex
Mm-hmm.
work. And
Mm-hmm.
what I'm trying to figure out, and maybe you have the answer, is how to stop, because to me this is real exploitation. These industries using, your stories to make
Mm-hmm.
money for themselves and then excluding the industry that inspires their content. You know what I mean? Like, how do
Yeah.
we start? Because that is exploitation. For all these people saying that we care about exploitation, we condemn sex work because women are being exploited. That is textbook exploitation. So how do we begin to unpack this?
In terms of companies using the stories of sex workers to make money, whatever, They can do what the fuck they like. I don't really give a shit about that. But the only way to change people's perception of the sex industry is to actually remove the criminalized status. Because as long as they see us as criminals and are in the industry, being abused by pimps, quotation mark,
Yeah.
and being put in vulnerable positions like street sex workers getting into cars with people they don't know that they've never screened before, that goes away with decriminalization. Like, there's still street sex workers in King's Cross, for example, in Sydney, but they have safe spaces to work in. They've got places that they can hire directly in King's Cross for a certain fee. So they can just go in there and hire the room, and then the John or the client leaves, and it's a lot safer. There is obviously still women that do get murdered in the industry. There was a murder in Adelaide, but it's criminalized in Adelaide. So the clients know that it's criminalized, and they often take advantage of that, or they try and take advantage of someone who is breaking the law. Like, for example, there was a sex worker in the news probably about 3 months ago that had a client out the front of her door that was, crying wolf, that she was doing illegal in-calls, blah, blah, blah. And, it's kind of like with in-calls, I don't do them personally, but it's kind of like an unspoken rule is to just not talk about in-calls.
Right.
It's protecting the worker to not talk about the in-calls, and it's protecting you because technically you're trying to get an illegal service.
Right.
So if you're trying to procure an illegal service, like for instance, sex without a condom or an in-call, you could be charged for that. And a lot of people don't realize that. The only way to change the stories that are written in media is to change what is the reality. And for a lot of people, violence is a reality, and that's because of criminalization. The only way to change reality is to change stories, fiction, is to change the actual reality of the situation. And it's funny because a lot of people say that, the depictions of women in the TV shows and movies they're not genuine. That's not the reality. But for a lot of people, it actually is. Like, I've met people who spend all of their money on drugs, for example, or they've been victims of assault. That does happen. It is in the industry, and that is because of regulations that make it that way, or the criminalization. And the only way to change the stories is to change the actual reality of it. And it's not the company's fault for portraying the reality of it. I'm saying reality a lot, but that is genuinely, like, I've experienced violence in it before, but I've also experienced violence in a freaking boring ass retail job.
That's right.
So it's just changing the situation, basically. Like, if they changed all of Australia where it was all decriminalized and every escort could, if they were ripped off by the client, they could go to the police, or if they had drama started out the front of the in-call situation, they could call the police and get them straight out there without being charged. That is the best outcome for workers, is they're able to be less vulnerable by being able to seek out police help. And a lot of sex workers also are mistreated by police because they're criminalized. So they're often, asked sexual favors or stuff like that, or they've been beaten by police officers. So it's just about changing the actual, the real stories to get the better examples, of women that are, I don't like saying empowered because it's not really, work doesn't need to be empowering, but the more empowered examples is to lift those women up, take the criminalization away, and then there would be less stories of women getting beaten and raped and stuff. But that's just that is unfortunately the reality of the sex industry. Is there's a lot of clients who think that they can do that to you, and they can, because you can't go to the police, and that's the God, I'm going to say it again. That is the reality of it.
Well, I mean, you've given us a lot of information, April. Thank you so much for your time. It's crazy late where you are, so I'm going to wrap it up. But can I plug your website?
Sort of. You can plug my Twitter, which is April Apparent.
Okay.
So yeah, you can
April
just put it in the
apparent.
description.
Yeah, I'll put it on
And
the bottom
my
of the video.
escort website, which I don't really want to plug, but
Okay.
it's got my blog on it. So
Okay.
it's aprilethereal.com. And any other information you can find on my Twitter because I post about it a lot.
Awesome. And you got a tour going on right now too.
Well, I've got a tour in Brisbane, which is 29th until the 3rd.
Hmm.
Yes, yeah, that's when I go travel to other states because the laws are different and it makes it easier for me to work. So that's the only reason why I really travel. Because I hate
Right.
traveling.
Oh, you hate try. Yeah, that's not good. I know from experience that isn't good for eating habits either.
No.
Road food puts on weight.
Yeah, exactly. I know. Oh my God, I eat the worst in Sydney. I had pad thai, which is about the healthiest thing that I ate. Oh,
April,
it was so bad.
thank you so much for your time. This has been really, really informative.
All right, cool.
Uh,